Okay, so today we will be discussing a very important topic that is constructor. Constructor is a function in a class. It has some features like the name of the constructor function should be same as that of the class. Like here in the screen you can see the class name is laptop and we have made a function laptop inside the class. So this laptop function within the class is called the constructor or constructor function. So constructor is a function, is a public function of a class. The name of the constructor function should be the same as that of the class name. It should match case sensitive, like when the L of laptop is capital, the L of laptop function also should be same, and there should be no return type. Like when we create any function, we give the return type as void or integer or float, whatever value the function returns. The constructor function does not return any value, not even void. So we don't have to mention the return type. We don't have to write void also. It should start directly by the class name. Now, what is the importance of this constructor? The constructor is automatically executed as soon as the object is created. In this example, which is there on the screen, you can see that the there are two laptop functions. One is starting at line number 8 and another one is starting at line number 12. So the function, the laptop function without any value as a parameter is called default constructor, and the laptop function with a parameter is called the parameterized constructor. Now what will happen is, as soon as in the main you can come at line number 24, but as soon as we create an object laptop L1, so L1 is the object of this laptop class, and this will call the default laptop constructor from line number 8, and the rate of the laptop variable will be initialized to 50,000. Similarly, when we create a laptop function at line number 25, you can see with a value, it calls the parameterized constructor. This is a parameterized constructor. So this value 65,000 will be transferred to the parameter n, and from there it will go to the rate variable of the class. Later on, when we call the show function with L1 object, it will give the rate of laptop as 50,000, and when we call the L2 object show function, it will give the rate of the laptop as 65,000. So why do we create a constructor? The important thing is that when we create a variable in a class, we cannot initialize it here. Like we cannot mention 45,000 here. So why? Let me save and compile this. Why this is not allowed is, if we initialize the class variable at the place where it is declared, every object of this class will have the same rate, but different company laptop should have different rate. So it is not good to initialize it at the place where it is being declared. Here there is an error in the program. Let me first correct it. I'll save this program. I'll compile it again. Now in this program, there are two. See, non-static data member initialize is only available. There is an error coming at line number 6. Line number 6, there is an error here. What is the error? You can see Non-static data member initializers not allowed. And so what we do is, let me remove this initialization. I'll save this. I'll compile this again. Now this is compiling, which means that the variables in the class are not initialized when they are declared. It is initialized in a constructor function. The rate variable declared at line number 6 is initialized at line number 10 and is initialized at line number 14. When we want the default value of the laptop, we initialize it in the default constructor without any parameter. When we want to initialize a fixed value to the variable, we do it with the parameterized constructor. So when we create the object of the class and this object does not have any value as a parameter, it calls the default constructor and the variable of that object is initialized with the default value. Here the default value is 50,000 for the rate of the laptop. When we create an object with some fixed value as a parameter, like in line number 25, what will happen is it will call the parameterized constructor and it will initialize the variable with a value which is passed at the uh, time of creation of the object. Now, when we call this L1.show, it will show 50,000, rate is equals to 50,000. When we call L2.show, it will say rate is equals to 65,000. So let us compile and run it again. This, now you can see it here. Rate is equals to 50,000 and rate is equals to 65,000. So for the two objects that we have created, these are the different rates. Now suppose we create one more object, laptop L3. If we don't give any value to it, it will call the default constructor, this constructor, and the rate for this L3 will be 50,000. Let us remove these functions and I'll call L3.show. L3.show. Now let me save this. Let me compile this. Now you can see that the rate is 50,000 for L3. Why? Because we have not provided any value to it. For the same laptop L3, if we put the value as 70,000, let me save this. Let me compile this. Let me execute this. See, now when we create the object L3 with 70,000 value, it calls the parameterized, excuse me, it calls the parameterized constructor and initializes the rate variable with the value 70,000. So this is the need of the constructor. Constructor is required because we cannot initialize the variables declared in the class. So to give the values to those variables, either we can create some function and call those function, or we can create a constructor and then we can initialize those variables. I'll come to another example. We'll see one more example here. Let me run the program again with a different value. Now see, in this program, this is the same laptop program with a different variables. The rate variable is there. We have one more variable of a string type, the company. That means every object of this laptop class will have two values, the rate and the company. Like the rate can be 50,000, company can be Lenovo. The rate can be 60,000, company can be Dell. The rate can be 70,000, company can be HP. This way. This function is now commented. It will not be used in the program. We have a laptop constructor that is taking two values, the rate and the company name, and it is initializing. Now, see here, we are creating two objects of the laptop and we are passing two values. For L1 laptop, we are passing 50,000 as the rate and company name is Lenovo. For L2 object, we are passing 55,000 as the rate and company name as Dell. Let me compile this. Okay, now let us run this program. See here, for the laptop L1, the rate is 50,000, company is Lenovo. For the laptop L2, the rate is 55,000 and the company is Dell. What happens? Let us see the memory. In memory, if you can see, L1 object will have two variables, rate and company. L2 object will have two variables, rate and company. When we create the object, these functions, the constructor function will be called and these two values will be initialized. Here we have not used any default constructor. So every class must have a default constructor. Let us also create a laptop with a default constructor and let us fix the rate to be the default value for a rate can be 45,000 and suppose the default company name is Dell. Now if we create a laptop object L3, we don't pass any value, then it will have the rate as 45,000 and company will be Dell. Let me delete this. Yeah. Let me execute. See, it is calling the default constructor and fixing the rate. Now, suppose we don't want to initialize, we want to take input for the values, then we can create a function. Like we have here created a set data function and set data function can be called and then values can be initialized. So what we can do is we have created L3. Now L3 dot set data function can be called and here we can pass on the value. Suppose the value of L3 rate is 70,000 and the company is suppose HP. Now in this program we have not used constructor. I'm commenting this. I'm creating an object L3 and then the L3 object is calling the set data function. Set data function will pass 70,000 and HP to R and C and from there it can be initialized. So when we call the show function, it will display the rate as 70,000 and the there is one error. Okay, semicolon is missing here. So for this particular case, the rate is 70,000 and company is HP. So there are two ways to set the value of the variables inside the class. One is the default way of creating a function and then calling the function. The other one is by the constructors of the class. So if we use the constructor, the value has to be passed as soon as the object is created. And when we use the function, then first the object is created and then we can call the function to set the values of the variables. So quickly, let us see what is a constructor. Constructor is a function of a class. Let us make the points. What are the important points regarding constructor? We'll see one by one the important points. So constructor, first very important part is constructor is a public function of class. It is used to initialize class variables. Why? Because as the variables are not allowed to initialize at the time of declaration. When we declare variable, we cannot uh, initialize them. This is not allowed in C++. So what is a constructor? Constructor is a public function of a class. It is used to initialize class variables, as variables are not allowed to initialize at the time of declaration. Now, what are the features? Name of constructor must be same as that of class name. Next, it does not have any return type, not even void. Void भी उसके आगे we don't have to mention. Then it is called automatically when the object is created. It is called only once when the object is created. It is called automatically and only once. In this program, you can see that this constructor function for L2 object will be called only once. We cannot call this constructor function again, but for set data function, suppose we want to change the value, we can call the function again and again. Suppose the rate may be 75,000, so we can call it again to change the value. But constructor cannot be called again. It is called automatically once only when the object is created. It is used to initialize the variables. The constructor without parameter is called default constructor. Every class must have one default constructor. Every class must have one default constructor. If we do not create a default constructor, the compiler creates for us. So if we don't create a default constructor, the compiler will create a default constructor for us, and it will have a default value. Like for float variable, it will have 0. For a string value, it will have null. For integer value, it will have 0. So constructor without any parameter is called default constructor. Every class must have one default constructor. And if we do not create a default constructor, the compiler will create the default constructor. The constructor with parameter is called parameterized constructor. The constructor with parameter is parameterized constructor. The constructor without any parameter is called default constructor. The constructor with parameter is called parameterized constructor. There is one more constructor that is called the copy constructor. So let us see the copy constructor. Now see, in this example, we have one more constructor. This constructor has a parameter as a object of the class. And what is happening here is when we create an object L3 and we want the L3 object to be a copy of L2, so then we pass L2 as a parameter. So L2 is passed as parameter to this laptop constructor, and the rate of the L2 object is being passed to the L3 object. So when we call L3 and when we call L2, the values will be same. See here, we have created L2 object. So the L2 object will have 55,000 and Dell. Now we want to create another object L3 and it should be exact copy of L2. So we don't pass the value is 55,000 and Dell. Instead, what we are doing, we are passing L2 object. This L2 object will copy the rate and company to the new object. So the L3 object rate will be 55,000 and L3 object company will be Dell. Now if we show the values, both will have the same output. See, both have the same object. Rate for L2 and rate for L3 are same, company for L2 and company for L3 are same. So this is another constructor. So in this program, you can see there are three constructor. One is without value. This is default constructor. This is parameterized constructor, and this is the copy constructor. This is copy constructor. The copy constructor takes as input the parameter of the object as a parameter. The default constructor does not have any parameter, and the parameterized constructor takes as some values as a parameter. So these are the three types of functions in a class: the default constructor, the parameterized constructor, and the copy constructor. All these constructors have same function. to initialize the variables. We have noted down the points also here. These are the different points which are very important for any constructor. So I'll keep this session here only. I'll stop now and we can have more discussions later on. I hope you all understand this concept of